The most powerful woman in any room she'd ever walked into was completely undone by a missing shoe. Not a missing child, though that came next, and that was so much worse. It was the shoe that Vivienne noticed first. A tiny white Mary Jane sitting in the middle of the Meridian Grand's marble lobby floor, tipped on its side like a small surrender flag. And something cold moved through her chest before her brain had even caught up with what her eyes were seeing. Piper, she said it quietly, the way you say a name when you're hoping the sound of it will conjure the person. Piper. Nothing. The Meridian Grand's annual Legacy Finance Summit had taken 3 months to organize. Vivienne Ashby, Chief Executive Officer of Callaway Capital Group, Forbes 40 under 42 years running, the woman who had restructured 3 failing hedge funds before she turned 36, had overseen every catering decision, every panel speaker, every seat assignment in that ballroom. She had flown in from Chicago that morning, held a pre-event briefing at 7, changed in the 14th floor suite at 8:30, and made it to the lobby with Piper at 8:52 exactly as planned. Piper had been holding her hand, and then one of the board members had touched Vivienne's elbow, Lawrence something, from the DC office, and she'd turned for what felt like 4 seconds, maybe 5, and when she turned back, the hand in hers was gone. Her daughter was 4 years old and had not spoken a single word in 14 months. Vivienne had not told the board this. She had not told her investors, her PA, or the concierge currently approaching her with a practiced smile and a clipboard. She had told exactly one person, her sister in Portland, and that conversation had ended with her sister crying and Vivienne staring at a wall in her hotel bathroom until the feeling passed. There were things you managed. Vivienne had always managed things. Mrs. Ashby, she said automatically. I need you to check the East Corridor. The concierge blinked. I'm sorry, my daughter. 4 years old, dark hair, yellow cardigan, 1 shoe. She was already moving. Get someone to check the East Corridor. I'll take the ballroom. She walked quickly, then faster, then something that wasn't quite running because Vivienne Ashby did not run through hotel lobbies. She moved with intention, which looked different from the outside but felt, from the inside, exactly like panic. The ballroom doors were propped open for setup. Round tables covered in white linen, half-dressed, centerpieces half-assembled. A woman arranging place cards looked up as Vivienne passed. No Piper. She checked behind the draped stage, checked the side corridor that led to the kitchen, checked the coat check alcove and the narrow service hallway and the bathroom that smelled like gardenias. No Piper. She pressed her phone to her ear. Security, I need security, in the main lobby, 1st floor now. And then she heard it. Not Piper's voice. She hadn't heard Piper's voice in over a year, and the silence of that had become a weight she carried everywhere. This low, constant grief that she had learned to function around the way you learn to walk with a stone in your shoe. What she heard was a man's voice. Low. Unhurried. The kind of voice that didn't rise at the edges. See, the trick is you gotta hold real still, like a statue. Can you do that? Vivienne stopped in the corridor just outside the East Lounge. A really good statue. Like, okay, you know those guys at the farmer's market, the ones painted silver? That still. But not forever. Just for a second. She stepped to the doorway. In the far corner of the lounge, beside a window that looked out onto the gray Chicago morning, a man was crouched down at floor level, his back mostly to the door. He was wearing a work shirt, charcoal gray, the kind with the logo of a company on the chest, and his boots were the kind that had been somewhere. He had a small painted wooden bird in one hand, a blue jay, the kind you found in craft stalls or hotel gift shops, and he was balancing it on the tip of one finger, absolutely motionless. Across from him, cross-legged on the floor with her remaining shoe tucked under her knee, was Piper. She was watching the bird. Vivienne's throat closed. There he is, the man said softly. You see, he thinks we're trees. Piper's eyes were fixed on the small blue bird. Her mouth was slightly open. Vivienne had spent 14 months in waiting rooms. She had sat across from 3 speech therapists, 2 child psychologists, 1 developmental pediatrician, and a specialist flown in from Boston who had gentle hands and a very expensive hourly rate. She had read every study, tried every approach, bought every book recommended by every forum she'd ever found at 2 in the morning when the silence in their apartment felt too loud to sleep through. She had learned not to push, to follow Piper's lead, to build safety and routine and patience, to accept that healing wasn't linear and that some children needed longer, and that this was not her failure even when it felt like it. None of it had looked like this. The man balanced the bird for another long moment, then let it tilt slowly toward Piper, like it was landing. And Piper reached out one small hand and let the bird land on her finger. "There you go," the man said. Vivienne pressed her fingers against her mouth. "What's his name?" The man's voice was barely above a murmur. Piper looked at the bird. Then she looked at the man. Then she looked back at the bird. And in a voice so small and careful it barely disturbed the air between them, she said, "Blue." The word cracked something open in Vivienne's chest that she had not known was sealed. She must have made a sound, because the man turned. He was in his mid-30s, brown-eyed, a day or two of stubble, the kind of face that had been outside in all kinds of weather. There was a small scar at the corner of his jaw. He looked at Vivienne the way someone looks when they understand immediately that they are seeing something private. He didn't say anything. He didn't stand up and make a fuss. He just shifted slightly so that Piper could see her mother. Piper looked up. She held the bird out toward Vivienne with both hands, the way children offer things they find precious. Vivienne crossed the room in 4 steps and folded herself down onto the floor beside her daughter, and she did not care about the summit or the board members or the $300 dry clean only dress. She pressed her face into Piper's hair and breathed. "Blue," Piper said again, against her shoulder. "Yeah, baby," Vivienne managed. "Blue. His name was Reed Calloway." No, wait. His name was something she'd have to ask again, because the first time he'd told her she'd been crying too hard to catch it properly, which was deeply embarrassing and also completely understandable, and she'd decided to be at peace with both of those things. He was a Finnish carpenter. The hotel had him in that morning to install the custom millwork in the East Conference rooms. Baseboards, crown molding, a set of built-in shelves that had apparently arrived 3 days late from the manufacturer and needed to be fitted before the afternoon panels. He had found Piper in the corridor outside the lounge about 20 minutes before Vivienne did. She'd been sitting on the floor against the wall with her knees pulled up, absolutely silent, watching the cleaning staff move past with wide eyes. He'd sat down on the floor about 6 feet away, which he said later was just instinct, that you never crouch over a scared kid, you get small and you wait. "My daughter used to do that," he said. "Shut down when it got loud." She grew out of it mostly. They were sitting in the hotel's side cafe, Vivienne and this man and Piper, who was now eating a plain croissant in careful small pieces and still holding the blue wooden bird. Vivienne had ordered coffee and then not touched it. The summit was underway 3 floors above them. Her phone had 12 unread messages. "How old is your daughter?" Vivienne asked. 6. "She's with my mom today." He wrapped both hands around his own coffee cup. "Her name's Rosalind. We call her Roz." Vivienne looked at him. "You do this a lot? Sit on floors with other people's children?" He almost smiled. "Not professionally, no. I don't know what I meant." She exhaled. "I'm sorry. I'm usually better at words. You found out your kid spoke for the first time in over a year in a hotel lounge while you were looking for her shoe," he said. "I think the words can wait." She looked at him again, differently this time. He had found the shoe, as it turned out. It was sitting on the windowsill beside him. He'd placed it there at some point while he was talking to Piper, matter-of-factly, like he just thought it should be somewhere it wouldn't get kicked. She hadn't spoken, Vivienne said. It was the first time she'd said it that plainly to a stranger, since my ex-husband left, 14 months ago. She picked up her coffee cup and put it down again without drinking. The doctors call it selective mutism, but she speaks at home, just less, very little. With strangers, not at all. She looked at Piper. Until, he agreed. Why did it work? She heard the edge in her own voice and didn't try to smooth it. I need to understand it. What did you do differently then? She stopped. I'm sorry. That's not a fair question. I didn't do anything differently, he said simply. I wasn't trying to get her to talk. I was just there, Vivienne sat with that for a moment. She reminded me of Roz, he said. The way she was watching everything, real careful, like she was taking notes. Roz does that. It means she's interested. She just needs time before she decides you're safe. And the bird? I had it in my toolbox. Roz painted it, actually, for a school project. She sends me off with it every morning like a good luck charm. He said it without embarrassment, which Vivienne found unexpectedly disarming. I showed Piper, and she tracked it like it was the most important thing in the room. It probably was, Vivienne said. It was something small and still in a room full of noise. He looked at her like she'd said something that landed right. The summit ran until 6. Vivienne chaired the afternoon panel on emerging market volatility, which she did on 4 hours of sleep, and the specific kind of hyper-focused calm that descends after a crisis passes. She answered questions precisely, fielded 3 follow-up conversations in the corridor, shook the right hands in the right order. Piper spent the afternoon in the hotel's family lounge with a babysitter Vivienne had called from a service she used for business travel. When Vivienne came to collect her at 5:40, Piper was sitting at a low table drawing something in careful crayon lines. When she saw Vivienne, she held up the drawing. It was a bird, blue crayon, rough-edged, but unmistakably intentional. Blue, Piper said. Vivienne kissed the top of her head and took the drawing with both hands like it was something breakable. She had not expected to see the carpenter again. She'd thanked him properly in the cafe, shaken his hand, said something about what it had meant, felt simultaneously that words were completely inadequate and that there were no better ones available. He'd waved it off in the understated way people do when they're not comfortable being thanked, and he'd gone back to his baseboards, and that, she thought, was that. She was in the elevator, Piper asleep against her shoulder, when she remembered she'd left her leather folder on the cafe table. The folder with the annotated briefing documents for tomorrow's breakfast meeting and the handwritten notes she'd made on the plane and the business cards she'd collected since 10 that morning. She rode back down. The cafe was still open, low now, mostly empty. Her folder was on the table where she'd left it, but someone had put a paper napkin over it, weighed down by a butter knife so it wouldn't slide, and on the napkin was a note in careful block handwriting. Figured this was important. Left it where you could find it. NH. She read the initials. Stood there for a moment, asked the barista, who told her the man had come back about an hour ago to return a tool he'd forgotten, seen the folder, and done that. She put the napkin in her coat pocket. She found his company's information in the hotel's vendor records 3 days later, which required 1 phone call to the hotel's events manager, and a brief and only slightly overstated explanation about a follow-up regarding the millwork installation. The company was called Hartwell Fine Finishing. 1 location, out of Evanston. The website was functional but minimal, before and after photos of built-in bookshelves, some wainscoting, a kitchen renovation in Lincoln Park. It had clearly not been updated in a year. She had his name now, Nate Hartwell. She did not call him. She looked at the number for 2 days and then put her phone face down on her desk and wrote 17 emails to other people instead. On the 3rd day, Piper said a new word at breakfast, spoon. Just that. She was pointing at the spoon in the cereal bowl, and she said it matter-of-factly, like she was informing Vivienne of something Vivienne might not have known. Vivienne called the number. It rang 3 times and then, Hartwell. This is Vivienne Ashby, she said. You held on to my folder at the Meridian. I wanted to thank you properly. A beat. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. I wanted to. She was standing in her kitchen in socks, which was not how she'd imagined this call going. How's the millwork? Finished. A pause. How's? He stopped. She said 2 more words since, Vivienne said. Spoon this morning. Blue the evening after. She kept her voice even. The therapist says not to over-attribute single events, that recovery is non-linear. That's probably right. Yes. She looked out the kitchen window at the gray March sky. It was still the best day I've had in 14 months. Another beat longer. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm glad. She made herself say the next part. I'd like to compensate you. Not just, I'd like to offer Hartwell Fine Finishing a contract. I'm renovating the trading floor offices next quarter. It's a significant job. You don't have to do that either. I know. Will you come look at it anyway? He said he'd think about it. She said that was fine. She hung up and stood in her kitchen for another moment, and then Piper walked in, bird in hand, and held it up. Blue, Piper said. Good morning to you too, Vivienne said, and for the first time in a long time, she laughed without it catching in her throat. Nate Hartwell came to look at the trading floor offices on a Tuesday. He arrived 10 minutes early and waited in the lobby without announcing himself, which Vivienne's assistant told her, only because she happened to walk past and notice a man in a work shirt studying the architectural details of the ceiling with apparent professional interest. She went down herself. He had a leather notebook and a tape measure, and he walked the space the way people walk spaces they're thinking through. Slowly, measuring things by eye, occasionally stopping to press a hand against a wall. He asked questions that were specific and practical, load-bearing implications of the shelving, preferred wood species, whether the aesthetic priority was warmth or precision. Vivienne answered all of them. She was better at this, at the crisp back and forth of a professional conversation, than she was at the other kind, and she knew it, and she suspected he had noticed. There's about 30 linear feet of custom cabinetry in the private offices, she said, and I want to redo the reception millwork. Right now it reads as committee designed. It does, he agreed. He was looking at the reception desk with a slight wince. Whoever spec'd that radius didn't account for the sight line from the elevator exactly. She paused. You see that immediately? Occupational habit. He made a note. I can have a proposal to you by end of week. She'd looked up his financials, as much as was publicly available, which wasn't much since Hartwell Fine Finishing was privately held. What she found suggested a business that was profitable on paper, but cash flow constrained, the gap between billing and payment that killed small contractors, the equipment lease coming due, one large client who'd gone slow on invoices. It was a familiar pattern. She'd seen it 100 times in businesses she'd evaluated for capital. She had not decided yet what to do about this information. She was aware that there was a version of helping that was help, and a version that was something else, and she was not always good at distinguishing between the two. Her ex-husband had told her this. He had not been wrong. Your business, she said carefully. How long have you been running it? He looked at her. He had the kind of eyes that tracked things precisely, she'd noticed. 7 years. Why? You're good, she said. Better than good. Your reputation is excellent. I called 3 of your past clients. She watched him process this. I like to know who I'm working with. You called my references before asking me to come in. Yes. He looked at her for a moment. Most people do it the other way. I know. She met his eyes. The proposal. End of week. He nodded once. When he left, her assistant appeared at her elbow. That's the man from the hotel? She asked. Yes. He left his tape measure on your conference table. I know, Vivienne said. He'll be back. He came back on Thursday to retrieve it. She happened to be free, which was not an accident, and she happened to suggest coffee, which he accepted without making a thing of it. They sat in the small kitchen off the trading floor, which smelled like someone's burned lunch and had a view of an alley, and Vivienne Ashby, who had negotiated 7-figure deals in rooms with better views, found that she did not want the conversation to end. He told her about Roz, about the pediatric sleep specialist and the 3-month wait for an appointment, about how Roz had been terrified of the dark until she'd started calling shadows, the room's sweater, and then somehow it was fine. About the Saturday mornings they spent at the farmer's market. Because Roz liked to count the number of dogs, he told her about the business. Carefully, not complaining. The way someone talks about a thing they've built when they don't want to seem like they're asking for anything. The referral pipeline that was either feast or famine. The payment terms that he'd set too generously in the early years and hadn't yet renegotiated because renegotiating felt like admitting you'd miscalculated. You've miscalculated, Vivienne said. That's not a moral failing. He looked at her. Yeah, I know that. Change the terms. I'm going to, starting with my contract, she said. 40% upfront, 30 at milestone, 30 on completion. I'll have legal draft it that way. He was quiet for a moment. You don't have to structure it to suit me. I'm structuring it to suit the project, she said, which was mostly true. Contractors who are cash flow constrained cut corners. I don't want corners cut. She looked at her coffee. I also don't want to run a charity. If the work isn't exceptional, the relationship ends. He held her gaze. Fair good. She picked up her coffee. Tell me more about the room sweater, he laughed. It transformed his face completely, and Vivienne made herself look away and look back, which was something she had learned to do. Not to refuse the feeling, just to not stare at it. The millwork took 8 weeks. He came to the offices Tuesdays, Thursdays, and occasional Saturdays when the floor was empty. Vivienne kept her usual hours. She was not the kind of person who happened to be present on those days more than professional interest required. She was, in fact, present every single Tuesday and Thursday. They got coffee 3 more times, which escalated naturally from the Alley View kitchen to a proper cafe on Michigan Avenue. They talked about Roz and about Piper and about the particular specific loneliness of being the only adult in a household with a small child who does not sleep through the night. They talked about Vivienne's ex-husband briefly and without heat, which surprised her. She'd expected the old anger and found instead that she'd misplaced it somewhere, or perhaps just outgrown the room it had been living in. Piper had 3 speech therapy sessions and added 11 words to her spoken vocabulary. The therapist said that whatever had shifted at the hotel had been a kind of door opening, and that doors, once open, tended to stay that way. Vivienne kept this information to herself for 2 weeks, and then told Nate in the Alley View kitchen on a Thursday afternoon while he was cleaning finish off his hands with a rag. He looked up when she finished telling him. That's good news, he said. It's the best news, she said. He nodded. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he said very carefully, I brought Roz back to the hotel gift shop last week. She wanted to see if they had more of those birds. She's building a collection. A pause. She asked me if the lady who cried was okay. Vivienne blinked. She saw that? She was in the lobby with my mom when I was in the cafe with you. He folded the rag. I told her the lady had a good reason for crying, and that she seemed like she was going to be fine. He looked up. Was that accurate? Vivienne looked at him across the small kitchen. The afternoon light came through the alley window at an angle that made everything look cleaner than it was. Yes, she said. I think that's accurate. The installation was complete on a Friday morning in June. The built-ins were extraordinary. She'd known they would be, but seeing it finished was something else. The grain of the white oak followed the line of the windows, and the joinery at the corners was the kind of thing you only noticed because it was so precise it looked inevitable. 3 of her senior partners stood in front of it, making sounds that were not quite words. Nate was packing his tools when she found him in the private office at the end of the hall. It's perfect, she said. It's good, he allowed, which she'd learned was the ceiling of his self-assessment vocabulary and the equivalent of anyone else saying exceptional. She had 2 things to say, and she had been deciding all morning which to say first. She chose the easier one. I'd like to offer you the renovation of the Chicago office's client hospitality suite. It's a bigger scope than this. I'll get you the specs next week. He stood with a level in one hand. You're satisfied with the work. I told you I would be if I was. He nodded. That was one thing. He waited for the other. Roz, she said. And Piper. I thought they might. There's a farmer's market on Saturdays. Piper likes looking at the produce. She doesn't actually want any of it, but she likes seeing the colors arranged, I thought. She stopped. Started again. I don't do this well. I'm aware of that. Do what? Ask for things that aren't professional. He looked at her steadily. You're doing fine Saturday, she said. The farmer's market, if you wanted to bring Roz. He put the level in his bag. He took a moment that she refused to fill. And then he said, she's going to want to count the dogs. Piper will want to hold all of them. That's going to be a lot of dogs. I have excellent negotiating skills, Vivienne said. I'll limit it to 3 per block. He closed the bag. He looked at her, and there was something in his face that was not quite a smile yet, but was moving in that direction with intention. Saturday, he said. The farmer's market was noisy and crowded, and smelled like cut flowers and kettle corn, and the particular warmth of a Chicago June morning. Roz was 6 and practical and immediately took charge of counting dogs in a small notebook she'd brought for the purpose. Piper watched her for a full 10 minutes from the safety of Vivienne's arms and then held out the blue wooden bird. Roz looked at it. "I painted one like that." "Blue," Piper said. "Mine is green," Roz said, "but blue is good too." Piper climbed down from Vivienne's arms. They walked together after that, the two girls slightly ahead on the wide path, Roz narrating dog sightings with the authority of a naturalist and Piper listening with the focused attention she gave to things that interested her deeply. Nate and Vivienne walked behind. He didn't reach for her hand. She didn't reach for his. There was time for that. Or there wasn't. And either way, the morning was bright and the city smelled like summer and Piper's voice floated back to them on the warm air. Not sentences yet, just words. Just small, clear offerings, blue and dog, and there and look, and every one of them landed in Vivienne's chest like something being returned. She had been the most powerful woman in every room for a long time. She had learned to carry that the way you carry anything heavy, by adjusting, by compensating, by not putting it down. Standing on a sidewalk in June, with kettle corn and someone else's child counting dogs in a notebook, she thought that maybe the rooms had been getting smaller than she'd noticed. This out here was considerably larger. Piper ran back and grabbed her hand. Vivienne squeezed it. Ahead, Roz had found a golden retriever and was recording it with great solemnity. 4, Roz announced. 4 dogs, and this one is very good. Very good, Piper agreed. Vivienne looked at Nate. He was watching the girls with the easy attention of someone who'd learned to be completely present in small moments, and she thought, that is a thing you learn by necessity, or you don't learn it at all. She was learning it. She was learning it now, on this sidewalk in this particular light, with 4 dogs and 2 girls, and a man who had once sat on a floor and waited quietly until a frightened child decided he was safe. It turned out that was a skill she needed too.